Happy 4th of July, America. Had a little story I wanted to share today regarding the Revolution. And those that know me know that I love family history. And as I've been digging back, the different line branches, there's so many you can go down. I found a lot of interesting people that were in the Revolutionary War, mainly just in the militia, maybe a few skirmishes, a couple of more interesting people that played significant roles. John Sevier as one, the governor of Tennessee, becomes the governor of Tennessee later in his life, involved with Kings Mountain, was probably most, heroic. And I've always asked the question, if during the Revolutionary period in America, 1/3 were actually loyalists, 1/3 were pro-patriot, wanted to break with England, and 1/3 was basically kind of neutral, didn't know what to think. I wonder, why can't we seem to find those pro-British ones? Nobody claims them. It's all kind of hidden. But I came across one, and very significant individual, and that was Colonel John Pyle. Through my grandfather on my mother's side, that line goes, and there's a couple of name changes there. The whole family married into the Pyle family. So anyway, very, very interesting little story I want to tell you is that John Pyle was born into a Quaker family. His grandfather came over during the time of William Penn came. He was a friend of William Penn and would have been involved with some of the early foundations in Pennsylvania. So he is born there, grows up there, marries. They move to North Carolina, establishes himself, has a family, a big family. And but he is pro-crown during the time things are changing, the frustration with England. He remains faithful to the crown, and a lot of the South does. The South was leaning towards Britain and staying English during that period. So he becomes a colonel in that. It's more of a militia, in and out. It's not a standing army. And he has a command, and he raises a militia of several hundred men, 400 or 500 men, I think, that were part of his militia. Could have been, unless I'm mistaken, that's what it was. It could have been 4,000. I get confused on the numbers there, but I think it was probably in the mid, 400 or 500. So at one point, they are going to meet, his militia, they're going to meet up with Cornwallis. Cornwallis is drawing troops together. Cornwallis is the general there in the South, very important commander of the British troops. And so as he's going that direction, they're going to come into a situation that's going to be considered called Pyle's defeat. And it's a big debacle, big mess that takes place. Now, the background is that at that point, soldiers, especially militiamen, would not have had red coats. Maybe some did, but it wasn't a customized uniform. We think we see these movies, but it wasn't like that. But his troops, he had encouraged them to have green coats and a hat and a little plume on it, and that's what his men had. Now, the problem was there's another group of pro-Americans, pro-patriots, under a man named Henry Lee, which is the father of General Lee of the Civil War period, that his men are dressed almost identical to Pyle's men. And so some scouts spot Pyle's men. Word gets back to Lee that there's a militia out there and they're dressed very similar. Now, originally, Lee is not thinking, I'm going to go just take those guys out. But as they're moving closer, they basically come into the camp of Pyle. And they go in there. And they had decided, I guess somewhere along the way, let's go ahead and see if we can capture these guys in using a little bit of deception. But it wasn't like some big plan. It was just kind of unfolded this way. So they end up in there, and Pyle's guys think these are pro-British troops that have come to connect with us, connected with Cornwallis, most likely. And so they're relaxed. They're not ready for some kind of a battle, but they do kind of line up to greet them. And so as they're going down, walking down. I think that a lot of them are on foot. Lee's men are walking in. Someone spots it and realizes these are not pro-British. These are patriots. And a fight breaks out in the back. At that point, swords come out, guns go off, and of course, Lee's men have the jump hugely up on Pyle because they know what's coming down. And about 90 men are killed in this fight that breaks out, this debacle. Pyle himself is wounded. He loses 3 fingers, an eye, and a bunch of the men scatter once because they're like, what's going on? And they run, they fight, and then they run. And I think 250 were wounded. So Pyle ends up in this pond called Pyle's Pond. And there's the descriptions of that, but yet he's captured. But he's released pretty soon after he's bandaged up and everything like that. He's a doctor, he's a medical doctor, and he's very compassionate, and he's actually had, cared for both sides before. He had brought medical care, and he continues to do that. So somehow he's released. I forget what happens. He's released, ends up in Pennsylvania, where his family's from. He's invited to a party where George Washington is. Now remember, this is more of a civil war, and so you have loyalists and patriots everywhere mixed up. And with the elites and higher statesmen, they would still meet. You'd go, you'd invite to a party where your enemy was at, and yet they were, the more gentlemen, and that was kind of the way it was run. So he's there. He has a talk with George Washington. He'd already begun to have a philosophical change regarding the war and the direction of America. And George Washington plants more seeds about the future of America and changes Pyle's mind. Pyle goes back to North Carolina, gathers information regarding some future battles and positions, and basically spies on the British and gets that information back to George Washington. He has become a spy, and the war is about over. And so when this comes out after the war, what he had done, he's considered a traitor by Britain. And King George III puts up a reward on his head for 5,000 pounds. Now, luckily, he wasn't taken out by the British. He does die soon afterwards. But that's the story, a little family history there. I thought it was interesting. Hope you enjoyed that. Again, happy 4th of July.